Well, welcome back. This is session 3 in our project discipleship. And today we're going to talk real brief about what are the spiritual disciplines. And I do have a question mark right next to disciplines, but my beautiful, handsome face is covering that up, at least on my computer screen. So there are 12 spiritual disciplines that we're going to be putting into our book and working on as a church and as a leadership team over the years. 10 of them were used in the spiritual participation profile that you have or that you will be filling out, which was put together by Dr. Thayer. And since she used 10 very specific spiritual disciplines or spiritual formations, it would make sense that as we do our research and as we do our study, that we use those 10 specific ones. And then at the end, I personally have added 2 additional spiritual disciplines that I deemed and I think are very, very, very important. And in fact, the last one is the one I'm working on now, and we'll have that one out soon. So let's just go over these 12 disciplines real quick. And most of them you are familiar and you'll recognize them right away. One of the disciplines is Bible study, so how we study our Bible, prayer, fasting, which is one we don't really talk about a lot, ministry, being out in the community and doing things for other, evangelism, telling others about Christ, worship, that is personal worship, corporate worship, the everydayness of our lives, stewardship, a giving of our time, talents, and money, confession, which you would say, well, that's prayer, and it is, but the specific discipline of confessing, our sins and our faults before God. There is meditation, which you would say, well, that's prayer too, but meditation is a little different, and we'll be talking about those things in the future. Then there is fellowship, and that's when we fellowship in our grow groups and at Sunday school, and when we get together and have barbecues and Thanksgiving meal, all that kind of stuff. And then there's the 2 that I added on, and one is journaling. And journaling is basically just the writing down, the recording of what God is doing in your life and is moving in your life, what he speaks to you through your personal Bible studies, and through your prayer and through your fasting and through the ministry and evangelism and worship. It's like capturing all those discipline things of what God's doing in your life, putting it on paper. And then soul keeping, which is that's a big discipline in and of itself. That's going to cover taking care of our soul, which is the operation of our mind, our will, our body, which keeps all those things together. It also includes personal Sabbath, where we need rest, and I'm excited to talk about that, and we'll get to that on a future date. Going back to what Thayer said, and this is just a big technical definition of these and what these disciplines do and how it works specifically through the project that we're working on. Through concrete experience, spiritual knowledge is grasped by the personal experience of relating to God. So through what we do, through this concrete things that we're doing, the exercise of spiritual discipline, we will gain knowledge relating to God. Through abstract conceptualization, it is grasped by abstract symbols of language and hearing both the scriptures and the testimonies of others that of experience, those things that other people have experienced. So we'll grasp different ideas and thoughts and symbols and language from hearing what the scriptures say, from hearing what others have said and going through. The reflective observation, spiritual knowledge is transformed into learning by critical reflection through active experimentation and is transformed into learning by praxis. And all that is just a great big crazy definition that says that this study, the spiritual participation profile that we're doing, using the spiritual disciplines, is going to help us holistically and every different part of our learning capacities and capabilities. And that's what's really cool and neat about this particular participation guide is that it uses different learning styles, and is very objective and being able to help us get to an end goal and becoming more like Christ. Dallas Willard, in his book Evolution of Character, defines or describes what the spiritual disciplines, the purpose of those things are in these two ways. It is a major service of the spiritual disciplines is to cause the duplicity and the malice that are burned in our will and our character to be surfaced and dealt with. And of course, duplicity is just simple deceitfulness or double-mindedness, and malice is that evil, hatred, all those things that are buried down deep in it. One of the major things is that's going to bring all of our stuff that we don't need inside of our life up and out to the surface so that we can deal with it in a Christ-like and a godly manner. He goes on to say, disciplines such as these, those 12 that we mentioned, make room for the Word and the Spirit to work in us, and they permit destructive feelings that are usually veiled by our standard practices and long accepted rationalizations to be uncovered and dealt with for what they are. Those things that we say are our will and not God's will. Excuse me. So Dr. Willard is very, very clear that when we practice these spiritual disciplines, that it's going to bring a lot of junk out. And again, going back to what we talked about in our first session, the fact of discipline being work and being exercise, and the idea of an athlete being in the gym and working, and the more that you work and the more that you do things and you sweat out all your impurities and they get out of your body to make you healthier and better. This is what the spiritual disciplines are going to do. So these disciplines that we're talking about are all biblically based, and as we go through each one in the next year or so, you will see that very clearly. These spiritual disciplines deal with our personal life. So they deal with us individually, they deal with us personally, our lives, our spiritual lives, everything about our lives. And they deal with our relationship with others. And going back to what Pastor Johnny has been teaching and repeating over and over and over again about the great commandment, and that is that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, our soul, our body, our mind, our strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And we kind of coined that as, LGLP, love God, love people. And this is the center of getting to that point in our life where we love God with everything, and then we take everything that God has done through us, and it affects our relationships. And this is exactly what this project is going to do through in us. So that concludes this particular section. We will pick up next time when we will actually talk about what a disciple actually is, compare that to some of the disciples of ancient times, and go through and talk about the branch and how we're connected, the vine and the vineyard and all that cool stuff. I'm excited about that as well. So thank you, and we will see you soon.